This house isn't yours anymore, Mom. It's for Liza's family now. You can pack your things. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Just stood there in the kitchen with my hands still wet from washing the breakfast dishes, looking at my son like I was seeing a stranger in his skin. And maybe I was. Evan had always been careful with his words, even when he was cruel. This was not careful. This was a verdict. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands on the old checkered towel I'd had since the 80s. The one nobody else liked because it was thin and soft and smelled faintly of lemon polish. I folded it, placed it on the counter, and looked out the window at the backyard. The hydrangeas were still in bloom, their heads heavy and blue, just like Harold liked them. He'd planted them himself when we moved into this house 42 years ago. Evan cleared his throat. "We've talked about this, Mom." "No, you talked." I listened and nodded to keep the peace, like I've done most of my life. Liza stood in the doorway now, arms folded, wearing one of those silky robes she always called loungewear, but wore all day like a costume. She didn't say anything, just smirked slightly, like she already considered herself the lady of the house. "I think a few weeks should be enough to sort your things," Evan continued, looking somewhere near my shoulder. "You can move into that senior complex on Harold Street. It's modern, safe." Liza found a brochure. I turned from the window and looked him in the eye. "Are you evicting me from my own home?" Evan flinched. "It's not like that, Mom. Liza's parents are getting older, and we need more space. You've had your time here. This place should be about the next generation now." I almost laughed. Had my time. As if I'd borrowed it from someone. As if this house wasn't built from scratch by my husband's hands and mine. As if every wall hadn't seen me pregnant, tired, cooking, crying, praying. As if I hadn't refinanced the damn place twice to help Evan finish college, buy his first car, get through his divorce. Every mortgage payment after Harold died came from my checkbook. I didn't say any of that. I just said, "Okay." Liza blinked. "Wait, you're agreeing?" "I said okay," I repeated calmly. "I'll start packing." Evan looked suspicious. "You're not going to make this difficult." "I don't see the point," I said, and smiled. Not kindly. "I suppose you've both already made up your minds." And just like that, the matter was closed in their eyes. Evan seemed relieved. Liza even managed a little smile, like a victorious politician. They left me alone in the kitchen. I didn't move for a long time. Then I dried the sink. I straightened the chair cushion. I wiped a crumb from the counter and placed the tea mug in the dishwasher. Then I walked to the hallway, opened the coat closet, and reached for the keypad behind the folded umbrellas. My fingers didn't tremble as I typed in the code. The small door clicked open. Inside was the safe. Not a big one, just enough for documents, a few valuables, and the file folder I'd kept labeled "if needed." I took it out, placed it on the dining table, sat down. Inside, the original deed to the house. My will. A notarized copy of the financial agreement between Harold and me. And a recent document, signed quietly 6 months ago, transferring the house into a revocable living trust. With a successor trustee named Caleb Jarvis. My grandson. Evan's son. They didn't know. Not yet. Caleb was the only one who still asked how I was doing, still visited without expecting something. He came by last Thursday, sat on the porch, helped me carry in groceries. Said, "Grandma, you've still got your wits. Don't let them bulldoze you." I didn't plan this in revenge. I planned it because I've lived long enough to know you don't wait until the fire starts to check if you've got insurance. I placed the file back in the safe and closed the door. Then I walked slowly upstairs. My knees ached as they do on rainy days, but my heart was strangely calm. That evening, I made meatloaf. Evan liked it, and so did Caleb. Liza didn't eat red meat, but I didn't cook it for her. At dinner, no one mentioned what was said that morning. Evan chatted about work. Liza talked about an interior designer. I nodded, smiled where appropriate. But inside, something had shifted. I no longer felt like a guest in my own home. I felt like a witness, watching them write their version of the story, unaware that I still held the original. That night, in bed, I stared at the ceiling fan, turning slow and steady. They think I'll leave quietly. They think I'll go pack boxes and fade into some soft-cushioned retirement. They don't know me at all. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset. Not even because I was angry. I lay awake because memories kept rolling in like waves, soft but persistent. The kind you don't ask for, but don't refuse either. I saw Harold again, tall, always with a smudge of paint on his shirt from the basement workbench. I saw Evan at 10, running through this very hallway with a frog in his pocket. And I saw myself, much younger, much thinner, sitting on the front steps with a mug of coffee, thinking how lucky I was to have a home like this. We built it ourselves, literally. Harold laid the foundation with his cousin Mark. I painted every wall, every room, including the ceiling in the bathroom, which nearly broke my neck. We didn't have much then, but we had each other, and this house rose up from that. We chose the land because it was just far enough from the city to have peace, but close enough to still get good radio reception. The apple tree in the backyard was a wedding gift from Harold's mother. The garage used to be a carport, and we enclosed it the year Evan was born. Nothing about this place was just a house to me, and now Evan and Liza wanted to strip it of all that. They didn't see memories in the cracks in the patio or the worn steps on the staircase. They saw dated finishes and underutilized square footage. I didn't tell them that I had overheard Liza talking to a contractor 2 weeks ago, asking about knocking out the back wall to expand the kitchen. She was standing in my garden, planning renovations as if I were already gone. That's when it started. That little voice inside me that said, "You need to be ready." So I'd called Mr. Heldman, Harold's old attorney, who now worked part-time and still kept my number in his old leather Rolodex. He met me on a Tuesday. I brought muffins and my stack of paperwork. "I'm not planning to die tomorrow," I said, "but I want to know that I'm not going to be bulldozed while I'm still breathing." He chuckled and said, "You've always been 5 steps ahead of everyone, Marilyn." We spent 2 hours drafting the trust, made Caleb the trustee. He didn't know, not yet. I'd tell him when the time was right. Because I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace, but I also wanted dignity. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to make coffee, and Liza was already there, wiping down the counters like it was her own kitchen. She glanced at me, and I could tell she was in one of her moods. "You left crumbs on the stovetop," she said, motioning to a small smear of flour from last night's meatloaf prep. "I'll take care of it," I said calmly. She kept wiping, a little more aggressively now. "We're having a photographer over next week, you know, for the holiday cards." "Lovely," I said. I reached for the coffee pot. "I was thinking we should finally repaint in here," she continued. "Something lighter. This green is so tired." That green had a name, sea moss, and Harold had chosen it himself after I vetoed his first pick, which was a very questionable maroon. "Well," I said, pouring the coffee, "tired doesn't always mean replaceable." She gave me a tight-lipped smile. "Evan agrees. We've already made a list of updates." "Of course you have." I took my coffee and left the kitchen. I didn't want to fight. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew where it was going. I wasn't going to play the part of the bitter old woman. I had something better. Certainty. Later that day, I called Caleb. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Grandma. Can you come by this weekend?" "Sure. Everything okay?" "Yes, I just have something I want to talk to you about." He hesitated, then said, "Is this about Dad?" "It's about the house." Silence. Then, gently, "I'll be there." I spent the next 2 days quietly organizing, not packing. Not the way they expected. I sorted papers, boxed up Harold's tools to donate to the Veterans Center. I cleaned the silver. I watered the plants. All the things a woman does not because she's leaving, but because she's preparing. Preparing for clarity. On Friday afternoon, Evan brought in a stack of moving boxes from the garage and left them by the stairs. "Just so you can start when you're ready," he said. I looked at them, then at him. Very thoughtful. He smiled, not picking up the sarcasm. After he left, I picked up one of the boxes, folded it flat, slid it under the couch. I wasn't going anywhere yet. The first time I met Liza, she wore heels to a picnic. Not the wedge kind, either. Narrow, shiny stilettos that sunk into the grass every time she moved. Evan kept offering to carry her plate or her drink or her chair, and she kept brushing him off with a laugh that was all teeth. I remember thinking, she's not the worst I've met, but she's not the kind that stays up with you in a hospital waiting room either. Turns out I was right. Back then, I made every effort, invited her to lunch, complimented her earrings, offered old recipes she could ignore politely. She called me Marilyn with a forced friendliness, like she was practicing for a play she hadn't wanted to be cast in. But I never imagined it would come to this. Liza didn't start taking over all at once. It was gradual, an art she'd mastered. One day, she bought new placemats for a fresher vibe. Then she rearranged the living room for better flow. Eventually, she stopped asking and just did things. Curtains came down, my dishes ended up in the garage, my books disappeared into boxes I never saw again. Minimalism, she'd say cheerfully. It's healthier. For who? I often wondered. One Saturday morning, I came downstairs to find her scrubbing the entryway tile. "You okay?" I asked, startled. It wasn't like her to clean. "Just prepping," she said. "Open house walkthrough is on Wednesday." I blinked. "Open house?" "Oh." She stood up, brushing her hands on her leggings. "Not like for sale. More like a showing. Evan's boss and some folks from his firm are coming. We want to make a good impression." She smiled brightly. "And you'll be upstairs, right?" It wasn't a question. That same week, she brought in a designer, young man, with distressed jeans and a portfolio full of white sofas and backlit mirrors. "We'll replace these old chairs," he said, pointing at my reading nook. "Something sleeker." I was still sitting in one of them. They didn't seem to notice. "You want this house to look like everyone else's," I finally said. "But this isn't a showroom." "It's an investment," Liza said. "You have to think long term." "I am," I replied. "More than you know." She didn't like that. Her mouth twitched, and she turned away quickly. Later that day, I heard her on the phone. "She'll be out in a few weeks. I'm keeping her calm for now." "Yes, trust me. She's not going to cause trouble." I didn't ask who she was talking to. I didn't need to. That night, I opened the safe again, checked the paperwork. All in order. Dated. Signed. Witnessed. Irrevocable unless I say otherwise. I added one thing. A handwritten letter to Caleb. Nothing legal. Just words from a grandmother who wanted him to understand why she did what she did. The next morning, I found my favorite chair gone. Liza said the designer had taken it to donate. No warning, no courtesy. That chair was Harold's, I said quietly. Oh, she blinked. It looked like it had seen better days. I looked around the room. So many things had disappeared. My rug, my clock, my calendar, my presents. That evening, I walked into Evan's office, formerly the dining room, and asked to speak. He was working on his laptop. I'd like to move into the guest room, I said. He looked up. Really? That's great. It'll give you and Liza more space downstairs. I understand you need that. He nodded, smiling. I appreciate that, Mom. Really. I stood there a moment. But I'd like to keep the guest bath as mine, and my books, and my name on the mailbox. He looked puzzled. Sure. I mean, the mailbox thing doesn't really matter, but yeah, of course. Good, I said, and left. I wasn't actually moving, not yet, but I wanted to see how it felt to play along, to give them what they wanted, at least the illusion of it. And sure enough, the next day, Liza started measuring the master bedroom. Evan asked me if I'd thought about selling some of my jewelry. You know, since you're downsizing. I smiled. One thing at a time. I went upstairs, closed my door, and started writing a list. Not of what to pack, but of what to leave behind. Not items, people. It started with a suggestion. You'd probably be more comfortable upstairs, Liza said, holding a mug of peppermint tea she hadn't made for me. The smaller room stays warmer in winter. I looked at her over the rim of my own mug, plain black coffee, brewed the way I've made it for 50 years. Smaller, I repeated. Well, cozier, she said quickly. You don't really need the whole master, do you? She said it like she was offering a favor, a thoughtful compromise. What she was offering was exile. I didn't respond, just stood and rinsed my cup. She didn't follow. The next morning, Evan brought it up again, this time with more polish. Mom, Liza mentioned something that, well, we think might be good for everyone. I kept peeling the potato in my hand. She thought maybe you'd be happier in the upstairs room. It's quieter, more private, more out of sight. Is that so? I said. He nodded. And the ensuite down here. It would make a great guest area. Liza's parents visit often now. I turned the potato over, slicing it in half. Are they moving in? I asked, keeping my voice even. What? No, he said quickly. Just staying more often. Of course. I remembered the last time I saw his mother-in-law, Sharon. She made a point of inspecting the bathroom after using it, said my towels smelled old, asked me if I'd considered replacing the tiles. I'll think about it, I said that day. I wasn't thinking about tiles. Now, standing in my own kitchen, listening to my son negotiate me into a corner, I realized what was really happening. They were phasing me out. One room at a time. One drawer. One chair. One sleeping space. You know, I said, Harold and I used to dream about turning that upstairs room into a sewing studio. He even offered to build me a proper table. Evan blinked. You never told me that. Some things don't need telling, I said. They just need remembering. He looked down at his coffee. I wondered if he even tasted it. Anyway, I continued, I'll move upstairs. Let me know when Sharon plans to stay next. I'll wash the linens. Thanks, Mom, he said, and smiled with genuine relief. That night, I didn't sleep in the upstairs room. I didn't even open the closet there. Instead, I sat in the armchair by the living room window, wrapped in the quilt my sister made when Harold died. The house was quiet. Outside, the trees swayed under moonlight. I thought about my name being erased from things. First from the guest list at holidays, then from shared bills, now from the master bedroom. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of being invisible. The next morning, I made a list, not of complaints, of facts. I paid the last 3 property tax bills. I bought the new water heater. I cover the electric and groceries. I gave Evan and Liza $40,000 5 years ago when they lost their condo. I signed nothing, gave everything. The deed is in my name. The trust is sealed. They do not know this. I folded the list and placed it in my recipe book, the one no one touches because it's too old-fashioned. Later that day, Caleb came by. He always knocks, even when he knows the door's open. A small, quiet kind of respect. "Hey, Grandma." "Hi, sweetheart. Come sit." He did. Long legs curled under him on the porch swing. "I need to ask you something," I said, turning to face him, "and I want you to answer honestly." He nodded. "Okay. If I left this house, today, tomorrow, where would I go?" He looked startled. "Wait, what?" "I'm asking a hypothetical." "You don't do hypothetical." I smiled. "You're right. Let's call it a draft of a plan." He frowned. "Did Dad say something again?" "It's not just your dad." He exhaled, rubbed the back of his neck. "I hate the way they talk to you, the way they act like this is their place." "It will be, one day," I said softly. "Not if I can help it." I looked at him then. Really looked. He had Harold's jawline, my father's eyes, and a voice that hadn't yet learned to hide its decency. I reached into my cardigan pocket and handed him an envelope. "What's this?" "Read it later. Not now. But I need you to keep it safe." He didn't argue, just nodded and slipped it into his jacket. "Grandma," he said quietly, "you don't have to stay here if it hurts." "I'm not staying," I said. "I'm preparing." "For what?" "For them to notice I'm not the one shrinking." Caleb came again on Sunday without being asked. That was something I always noticed about him. He showed up not because he wanted something, but because he remembered I was here. He brought me a cinnamon bun and a newspaper. "Figured you'd want the crossword," he said, setting the bag gently on the kitchen counter. "You figured right," I replied, watching him with quiet gratitude. Liza wasn't home, thank God. Evan was in the garage tinkering with his project car, which had been more of a prop than a vehicle for years. We sat at the table in the sunroom, a space Liza had once declared cluttered and unphotogenic. I never changed it. Caleb looked around and said, "I love this room." "You used to play under that table," I said. "Pretend it was a cave." He grinned. "I remember. You'd make me chocolate milk in a wine glass so I could feel grown up." "I still have that glass." He grew quiet then, folding and unfolding the corner of the newspaper. "You read the letter?" I asked, not looking up from the crossword. He nodded. "I read it 3 times. "And?" "It's a lot, Grandma." "I know. But it's right." I met his eyes. "I mean it," he said. "They don't treat you like someone who built this place. They treat you like someone borrowing it." I took a sip of my coffee. Borrowing is generous. Most days I feel like a squatter. Caleb hesitated. "You said in the letter that the trust is irrevocable, that I'm the successor trustee, that when you die, the house passes to me, but that you can also make decisions while you're alive." correct, and that you can appoint me early if you choose. Yes. He looked at me, serious now. Are you going to? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I said, when your father was 12, he carved his name into the windowsill in the upstairs bedroom. I didn't scold him. I thought, let this house carry his mark, even if it's small. I paused. Now he wants to erase mine. Caleb's jaw tightened. I'm not angry, I said. I just refuse to fade out quietly. So, what's your plan? First, I said, we let them keep talking. Keep assuming. I'll sleep in the smaller room, eat at their table, listen to their suggestions. Meanwhile, you'll talk to Mr. Heldman. Get familiar with the terms. And then we wait. For what? For the moment they ask too much. Later that afternoon, after Caleb left, I stood at the foot of the stairs and stared at the family photos on the wall. Most were crooked now. Liza had taken a few down to declutter and never put them back. One showed Evan at 23, holding newborn Caleb. He looked tired, surprised, proud. Another showed Harold, arms around me, grinning under the apple tree, our hands covered in dirt. That was the year we planted tulips. Only half of them bloomed, but we laughed like we'd won a prize. I touched the edge of the frame, then walked upstairs. The guest room was neat. Liza had set out a new blanket. Evan had moved in a lamp. There were no pictures, no traces of me. I opened the closet. Empty hangers, one shelf, a stack of Liza's yoga mats. I closed it. I didn't cry. Instead, I went to my old room, my real room, and opened the dresser. I pulled out the velvet pouch with Harold's wedding ring, the one he stopped wearing when his fingers swelled from arthritis. I used to keep it beside mine, but I wanted it with me now. I slipped it into my pocket. Then I looked in the mirror. Not for vanity, for witness, to remind myself who still lived here. The call to Mr. Heldman was brief. He remembered me immediately. Ah, Mrs. Jarvis with the iron filing cabinet and lemon muffins. I smiled. They were orange zest. Of course. Shall we meet? I'd like Caleb to come too, I said. He's ready. Heldman didn't ask for details. That's what I liked about him. He didn't fumble with polite questions about family dynamics or conflict resolution. He just said, Thursday, 10 a.m., my office, bring ID and your thinking cap. Caleb picked me up early. I wore navy slacks, a white blouse, and the gray wool coat Harold gave me for our 25th anniversary. Still fit, still warm, still mine. You look like a woman going to a courtroom, Caleb said, holding the car door. I'm not going to war, I replied, but I'll be prepared if someone declares it. The office hadn't changed in 30 years. Same carpet, same walls, same rusted filing cabinets. The only new thing was a Keurig machine that Heldman seemed to resent. Coffee? He offered. No, thank you, I said. We have business. He nodded approvingly and gestured to the table. Caleb, he said, your grandmother has set up a revocable trust in her name, with you as the successor trustee. That means, when she passes, you'll automatically gain control of the assets within the trust, primarily the house. Caleb nodded, focused. But, Heldman continued, there's also a provision that allows her to appoint a co-trustee at any time. That means you two would manage the trust together from now on. I turned to Caleb. I want that. Are you sure? He asked. I looked him in the eye. I've been more sure of this than anything in the last decade. Heldman slid the paperwork across the table. Now, he said, you should know that Evan and Liza are not legally entitled to anything unless you specify them as beneficiaries, and you haven't. I know. This could cause friction. It's already caused bruises, I replied calmly. I'm just putting a name to the pain. Caleb signed. I signed. Heldman stamped and filed. It was done. As we left the office, I felt lighter, not because I'd taken revenge, but because I'd drawn a line. Not with shouting, not with ultimatums. Just a quiet, steady declaration. No further. In the car, Caleb asked, "What do we tell them?" "Nothing," I said. "Not yet." "You really want to wait?" I looked out the window. Leaves were falling like confetti. Early October already. "They think I'm folding," I said. "Let them." That evening, I made soup. Potato and leek, Caleb's favorite. Liza didn't eat. Said she had a cleanse. Evan said he was too tired and ordered Thai. I cleaned the table alone, washed the dishes, wiped down the counters. Not because I was being obedient, because I was making peace with the kitchen I wouldn't keep. The next day, I received a letter from the bank, confirmation of trustee designation. I placed it in the safe, beside the insurance policy and the trust documents. Then I did something small. I bought a notebook. Not digital, not fancy. Just a brown-covered lined notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "They believe this house belongs to them now. They're wrong. But I don't need to prove it with noise. I'll prove it with grace. And with the law." Then I started writing, 1 page a day. What they said. What they didn't say. What they took. What I gave. A record. Not for court. For clarity. The confrontation didn't come like a thunderstorm. It came like humidity. Thick, clinging, building in silence until the air was too heavy to breathe. Liza was the one who brought it up first. Of course she was. It was Tuesday evening. I'd just finished folding the laundry. She walked into the living room without knocking, something she'd been doing more often lately, and held out her phone. "Would you mind explaining this?" she asked. On the screen was an email thread. My name, a legal contact. A subject line, trust amendment filed. I didn't blink. "You went through my emails?" Her lips curled in mock surprise. The browser was open. I clicked. "It's my house too, you know." "Is it?" I asked, folding the towel in my lap one last time. She sat down across from me, legs crossed like she was at brunch with a difficult client. "You changed the trust," she said. "You made Caleb co-trustee." I did. "And you didn't tell us. I didn't think you'd be interested." "Why wouldn't we be?" she snapped. "You live in our house." I looked at her carefully. "No, dear. You live in mine." The air crackled, finally. She stood, pacing. "You can't do this. We've made plans. Evan is up for a promotion." "This address is on all our applications. My parents visit here regularly. This was supposed to be our base, our family home." "It was never yours to promise." Her voice dropped, sharper now. "You are going to ruin everything we've built." "You built nothing," I said, softly but firmly. "You occupied." Evan walked in then, holding a laptop and looking confused. "What's going on?" "She made Caleb co-trustee," Liza said, not even turning around. Evan looked at me, the color draining from his face. "Is that true?" "It is." "Why?" I met his eyes. "Because I no longer trust you." The silence was thick. He set the laptop down, slowly. "Mom, you're being emotional." "No," I said. "I was emotional when I let you treat me like a tenant. Now I'm being deliberate. You can't just cut us out like this." "I haven't cut anyone," I said. "You're still living here, aren't you?" "But you've weaponized the house," he said, stumbling over his words. I laughed once. A bitter, clean sound. "This house was never a weapon," I said. but you made it a battlefield." They looked at each other, the kind of glance that passes unspoken accusations. Then Liza said it. "We want you to transfer the house." "To whom?" "To both of us, legally. It's time, Marilyn. You're getting older. You've already moved upstairs. You're not managing the house anymore. This is just the next step." "And if I don't?" "We'll have to talk to someone," Evan said quietly. "A lawyer. There's nothing to contest. You're being unfair." "No," I said. "I've just stopped being afraid." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Liza, arms folded, hissed, "You'll regret this." I looked her square in the face. "No, dear. I regret trusting you." They left the room. I didn't move. The clock ticked in the hallway. The heater hummed to life. Upstairs, I opened the safe, removed the envelope I'd prepared weeks ago, addressed it to Mr. Heldman. Inside, a letter authorizing Caleb to assume full management authority of the trust effective immediately. I signed it. Then I called Caleb. "They know," I said, "and they're angry." His voice was calm. "Do you want me to come over?" "Not tonight, but tomorrow we'll go back to Heldman's." "Okay." "And Caleb?" "Yeah." "Bring your ID." We were early to Mr. Heldman's office. Caleb held the door for me, like always. I noticed the way he adjusted his stance when we entered. Shoulders squared, chin lifted. He was ready. He was more than ready. Heldman stood as we came in. "Mrs. Jarvis, Caleb, please." He gestured to the same conference table we'd used the week before. The light from the window caught the brushed steel clasp on the folder I was carrying. "I assume this is about the amendment," he said, sitting down. I nodded. "They know." "Expected?" "Yes," I said, "but earlier than I would have liked." Caleb placed the envelope I'd signed last night on the table. "I'd like to invoke full authority," I said. "Effective immediately. Caleb is ready." Heldman opened the envelope, scanned the document, then looked up. "This makes you, Caleb, not only a co-trustee but the managing trustee, with full legal and financial control of all assets within the trust, including the house." "I understand," Caleb said. Heldman turned to me. "You relinquish day-to-day authority, but you remain a living trustee. You can reverse this decision as long as you're alive and competent. I have no intention of reversing it." He nodded once, then signed his own portion, adding the notarial seal with practiced ease. "It's done." Just like that. Caleb was now the legal manager of the home Liza thought she owned, and Evan thought he'd inherited. "Next," I said, pulling out a second folder, "I'd like to update the secondary beneficiary." Heldman raised an eyebrow. "Currently, no one is listed beyond Caleb. I'd like to keep it that way." "Noted," he said, making the correction. "No fallback to Evan or any surviving family. Upon Caleb's passing, assets dissolve into charitable assignment." "Yes, the Women's Veteran Housing Fund." Caleb blinked, surprised. "I didn't know you supported that." "My sister served. Came back with nothing, never married. Died alone in a rented room. I send what I can." Heldman made the entry. "It's airtight now, not contestable under standard state provisions." "Good," I said. "They threatened litigation." "Let them," Caleb muttered. Heldman smiled thinly. "They can try, but they'll be wasting their money." I closed the folder and placed it in my bag. "Do you want to serve them papers?" Heldman asked. "Make it formal?" "Not yet," I said. "I want them to sit with uncertainty. Let them feel what I felt for the last year. Being tolerated. Being replaceable." Caleb didn't speak on the drive home. Neither did I. but the silence was easy. At the house, Evan's car was gone. Liza's was parked at an angle in the driveway, as if she'd left in a hurry and come back faster. I entered through the back door. The kitchen smelled like lemon cleaner. A passive-aggressive gesture, no doubt. Liza hated the lemon scent. I used to choose it deliberately. In the living room, my chair was gone again. "What now?" I called out. No answer. I walked to the garage. The boxes I hadn't packed, the ones Evan left weeks ago, were now full. Labeled, sealed, bedroom, bathroom, misc, my belongings, my name, in Sharpie. I walked back inside, sat at the table, and waited. At 5:30, Evan returned. He walked into the kitchen, saw me, froze. "Where's Liza?" I asked. "Out," he said shortly. "What did you do?" "Legally?" He didn't answer. "I appointed Caleb managing trustee," I said. "He now controls this house, including who stays in it." "You've gone too far." "No," I said. "I've gone exactly far enough." His voice rose. "This is insane. Liza's furious. We were counting on this house for our equity, our future. You can't just change everything because you're feeling hurt." "I changed it," I said, "because I was tired of funding my own erasure." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. "You'll have to talk to Caleb now," I said. "He's the one with authority." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out. I sat at the table another minute, then went upstairs and unpacked the boxes. The call came just after 7. Caleb's name lit up the screen. "They want to meet," he said without preamble. "Where?" "Here, your place." "They think it's still theirs," I said. He sighed. "They're demanding answers. Liza wants to bring a lawyer." I paused. "Let them." There was silence on the line. Then Caleb asked, "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." They arrived together the next morning, Evan in his pressed office slacks, Liza in a black blazer that looked like it had been bought for courtrooms. No one hugged. No one even pretended to smile. Caleb greeted them at the front door. "We'll talk in the living room." I stayed in the kitchen, close enough to hear, far enough to observe. "You've made a mistake," Liza began, wasting no time. "This isn't how families handle conflict." "You mean by removing their mother from the master bedroom?" Caleb asked. Evan stepped forward. "Let's not make this emotional." "But it was emotional," Caleb said. "The day you told her to pack. The day you erased her name from the hallway wall. The day you stopped seeing her as a person and started treating her like an obstacle." Liza's tone sharpened. "She's manipulating you." "You're young. You don't understand how property law works." "I do," Caleb interrupted, calm. "Because I've read the trust. I've signed the documents. I've retained legal counsel. And I'm now the managing trustee." "You're 25, Evan said sharply. "This isn't a game." "No, it's not," Caleb replied, "which is why I'm here, and not you." The silence that followed was sharp, brittle. Then Liza laughed. "This is ridiculous. He's been poisoned by your mother's paranoia. This whole setup, this trust, she's just trying to control the narrative." "You mean?" Caleb said. "She's trying to stay in the house she paid for, protected, while the people she fed and housed for years tried to quietly shove her out?" "That's not fair," Evan said. "No, Dad," Caleb said softly. "What's not fair is that you raised me to believe family meant respect. But when Grandma needed that most, you gave her silence and a stack of boxes." I stepped into the room then, slowly, quietly. They all turned. "I'm not angry," I said. "Not anymore." Liza crossed her arms. You think this makes you noble? Turning your son against you? I didn't turn anyone, I said. I told the truth. He made his own choice. Evan looked older than I remembered. Not in years, in weight. You could have talked to us, he said. We would have found a way. You mean another way to get me out quietly? I asked. Another room, another name on the mailbox. Another time I'd come home and find my things packed for me? He said nothing. Caleb took out a folder. These are the current terms, he said. This house is part of an irrevocable trust. I am the acting trustee. You are not named. You have no legal rights to this property. You are welcome to remain guests, for now. But if you challenge this in court, we will respond accordingly. Liza's voice was barely controlled. You'll regret this. No, I said. I already did. For years. I just stopped pretending it didn't matter. Evan stood. Come on, he said to Liza. She didn't move. He grabbed her hand. Let's go. At the door, he paused. You've made your point. No, I said quietly. I've reclaimed it. They left without another word. That evening, Caleb sat on the porch, legs stretched out, sipping iced tea. They're not used to being told no, he said. Neither was I replied. For too long. He looked at me then, not like a grandson, like a man who saw someone whole. I'm proud of you. I didn't respond right away. Then I said, I'm proud of me too. That night, I opened the old cedar box in my closet. Inside were letters, dozens of them, bound with twine, corners yellowed, edges soft from years of turning. I hadn't looked through them in over a decade. They were from Evelyn, my younger sister. Most of the family doesn't talk about her anymore. She was the wild one, the brave one, the one who ran off with a jazz musician at 21 and came back 5 years later with a suitcase, 2 kids, and a bruised jaw. Our parents didn't forgive her, said she made her choices. But I did. I let her live with us. In this very house. I gave her the upstairs bedroom, the same one I'm in now, and helped her file for custody, for work, for dignity. Evan was 12 at the time. He didn't understand why his aunt cried in the bathroom, why she never looked people in the eye. I tried to explain. She made mistakes, I told him. But she's family, and when people are broken, you don't push them further into the dark. He didn't answer, just went back to his room. Later that year, Harold and I sat at this kitchen table, and I made a decision. Evelyn wanted to get back on her feet. She'd found a little apartment downtown but couldn't afford the deposit. Her ex was still haunting her life. She needed space, a clean break. I had just inherited a sum from my aunt. Nothing life-changing, but enough. Harold said we should invest it, save it, use it to fix the roof. I gave it to Evelyn instead. Family first, I told him. She moved out 2 weeks later, sent letters for a while, then fewer, then none. The apartment turned out to be another dead end. Her ex found her. She moved again and again. Eventually, the letters stopped coming altogether. The last one I held now in my hands. Dated April 1998. Smudged at the edges. A water ring in one corner. I know I keep saying I'll come visit, but life's not that simple. The boys are with their dad this week. I'm working double shifts. I just want you to know you saved my life, Marilyn. I was drowning. You pulled me up, and I never said thank you right. But I remember. Every time I stand on my own 2 feet, I remember who helped me do it. She died 2 years later. Car crash. Middle of the night. On her way home from a shift. I hadn't seen her in 6 years. Sometimes I wonder if the people we save ever realize what it costs. I put the letter back, retied the twine, and closed the box. That was the last time I gave everything away and hoped it would be enough. This time was different. This time, I wasn't giving the house to anyone. I was choosing who would protect it and who wouldn't touch it again. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the newspaper. The crossword was half done. I was circling back to it. Liza walked in. No makeup, no pretense. "I spoke to my lawyer," she said, like she was announcing the weather. I didn't answer. "He said we could contest the trust, that you might be found mentally unfit to sign it." I looked up. "You'll lose." Her eyes flickered. "You think Caleb can outmaneuver professionals?" "I think truth has a way of surviving things that lies can't." She shifted, arms folded. "We're not giving up." "I don't expect you to," I said. "But understand something, Liza. I'm not Evelyn. I don't give everything away and vanish. I stay." She blinked, caught off guard by the name. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "Just history." That afternoon, Caleb came by with groceries. "You okay?" he asked, watching me put away a bag of apples. "Yes." "You sure?" "I remembered something," I said. "Someone." He waited. "A time I gave up too much and didn't ask for anything back." "And now?" "Now," I said, slicing an apple clean in half, "I'm asking." The envelope arrived by courier. No knock, no signature required. Just a stiff, brown rectangle slid through the mail slot like a threat folded in half. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the kitchen counter beside the bread box and the morning crossword. I finished my coffee, washed the mug, and fed the sparrows through the window. Then I opened it. Inside, a formal letter from a local law firm. Lindholm and Crane. Polite in tone. Aggressive in intent. They were representing Mr. and Mrs. Jarvis in a petition for review of the trust's validity. They were concerned about my capacity to make legal decisions. They were requesting a temporary freeze on the trust's activity, pending a mental competency assessment. And finally, I had 14 days to respond. I read it once, then again. Then I folded it neatly, walked to the safe, and placed it under the file labeled Countermeasures. Later that afternoon, I called Caleb. "They've filed," I said. "Of course they have. They're challenging my capacity." He was quiet for a second. Then, "That's disgusting." "It's expected. I'll call Heldman." "Already on it," I said. 2 hours later, we were sitting in Heldman's office again. He looked less surprised than I thought he'd be, maybe more tired. "I've seen this before," he said. "They don't have to prove you're unfit. Just raise enough doubt." "Can they get traction?" Caleb asked. "If she were acting erratically, yes. But Marilyn has a clean paper trail, no medical flags, no psychiatric history. The original trust was notarized. The amendment was properly filed. We're on solid ground." "They're trying to shake us," I said, "and hoping we flinch." "Do you want a counterfile?" Heldman asked. "We can escalate." "No," I said. "Let's wait." "Marilyn." "Let them play offense," I said calmly. "We'll play memory." I returned home to find the mailbox open, empty, a small thing, but deliberate. That evening, Liza sent a text. This could have been peaceful. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out a blank page of my notebook and wrote, Day 37. They want a war of noise. I give them silence that echoes louder. I am not going anywhere. I am not unstable. I am not afraid. They contest the law. I am the one who built the foundation. 3 days passed. Then the call came. From Dr. Harris, my longtime physician. They reached out to me. he said, voice cautious. Asked for your medical records. Did you give them? Absolutely not. I called you first. Thank you. I can issue a letter, he added, affirming your capacity, your memory, your mental fitness. That would help. I'll draft it today. And doctor? Yes? Make it blunt. A week later, we sent our formal response. Not through Heldman, through Caleb. The letter was short. Marilyn Jarvis is of sound mind, documented by her attending physician of 15 years. The trust stands. You may proceed. Caleb Jarvis, trustee. 2 days passed. No reply. 3 more. Then Evan came to the house. Alone. He didn't knock. Just walked onto the back porch, where I was deadheading the hydrangeas. Mom. Evan. I don't want this to get ugly. It already did. He ran a hand through his hair. Why are you doing this? Why are you pretending I left you no choice? He sat heavily on the step. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. He looked up. So what now? You just cut me out? I didn't cut you out, Evan. I stepped back so I could breathe. I'm your son. Yes, I said. You are, but you became someone else when you let her pack my things. He stared at me, then down at the ground. I miss the old house, he said quietly. This is the old house, I replied. You just forgot what it meant. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. Not a trial, just a review session before a probate judge. But it felt like a reckoning all the same. Caleb drove us. He wore a charcoal suit that looked a little too big in the shoulders. I wore the same coat I'd worn to Harold's funeral. It wasn't grief I carried this time, but something heavier. Disappointment wrapped in resolve. The courthouse was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was larger now, in understanding, in clarity. We sat in a row of chairs outside the courtroom. Liza arrived first, striding in like she was late for a meeting. She wore navy and pearls, her lips pressed tight in the shade of lipstick I once found in the upstairs bathroom drawer. Mine, borrowed, never returned. Evan followed. He looked tired, less sure than before. But he didn't look at me. Their lawyer, a man in his 40s with a perfect part in his hair, greeted them briskly, then approached Caleb with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. You're the trustee? Caleb stood. Yes. The lawyer held out a hand. Best of luck. We didn't shake. Inside, the room smelled faintly of floor polish and dust. The judge was an older woman, glasses low on her nose, a silver pin on her collar. I liked her immediately. She looked like someone who had no time for showmanship. The proceedings began with introductions. Then their lawyer spoke. Calm, rehearsed. He argued that I had acted erratically, that I had suddenly rewritten legal documents under the influence of a single beneficiary, and that my advanced age raised questions about cognitive capacity. He used phrases like emotional manipulation and unfortunate family estrangement. He referred to me as the settler, never as a person. Then Heldman stood. He didn't raise his voice, didn't pace, just placed 3 documents on the table and spoke directly, like someone reading a recipe. Your Honor, the trust was executed in accordance with all legal standards. My client passed a cognitive capacity exam. A notarized affidavit from her physician confirms she is of sound mind. The successor trustee was chosen voluntarily, with no evidence of coercion. He turned slightly. She has not contested her son's right to live in the home. She has not filed for eviction. She has not taken any financial action against him or his wife. Her only request is that her right to designate her home's legal future be respected as the law provides. The judge asked for copies. Heldman handed them over without flourish. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Jarvis, would you like to say anything?" I stood, slowly. "I'm not here to punish anyone," I said. "I'm here because I stopped waiting to be asked what I wanted." I looked at Evan. He looked down. "I raised my son in that house. I built it with my husband. I paid for it, cleaned it, cried in it, laughed in it, buried memories in its walls." I paused. "I am not unstable. I am not confused. I am not irrelevant. I made a decision. I signed it with a clear hand and a clear mind, and I did so because love without respect is not love. It is leverage." Silence. The judge nodded once. "Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis." She reviewed the papers. Took less than 10 minutes. Then she spoke. "There is no cause to proceed with this petition. The trust stands. The amendment is valid. The court finds no grounds to challenge the settler's capacity. Dismissed." The gavel fell like punctuation. It was done. Liza stood before the judge, even left the bench, walked out stiffly. Evan hesitated, looked at me for the first time in weeks. "I didn't think you'd go through with it," he said quietly. "I always go through with what matters," I replied. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then followed his wife out the door. Caleb sat beside me. "You were perfect." "No," I said. "I was necessary." We walked out into the cold. I didn't shiver. Not this time. 2 days after the hearing, I woke up before sunrise. The house was silent, as if even the walls had finally run out of things to say. I padded downstairs in my slippers, made coffee, and sat in the living room, my living room, where everything was still exactly as I'd arranged it. The lamp, the chair, the photograph of Harold under the apple tree. But it no longer felt like mine. Not in the way that mattered. Yes, legally, I owned the house. Every brick, every window, every inch of the land. No one could take it from me now. But I didn't want to live inside a place where I had to prove I belonged. That morning, I called a woman named Louise. We'd met 2 years ago at a fundraiser for the local library. She ran a small co-housing community in a neighboring town. 10 older women who shared a converted farmhouse, each with her own private quarters and shared gardens. I remembered how Louise had said, "We don't take care of each other because we're frail. We take care of each other because we're wise enough to know what aloneness costs." She answered on the second ring. "Marilyn?" "I'm ready," I said. She didn't ask for context. She said, "I'll have a room prepared by Sunday." I packed slowly, not because I was hesitant, but because I wanted to touch each item and decide if it carried weight or just memory. I left behind the heavy armoire Harold built, left the china Liza had once mocked, left the framed degrees Evan never asked me about. I took the quilt from the porch, the cedar box of Evelyn's letters, the photograph of Harold, not the polished one, but the one where he's laughing, blurry, eyes half shut. Caleb came that afternoon. "You're sure?" he asked, not with doubt, but with care. "Yes," I said. "The house is mine, but peace isn't in the walls anymore. I'll keep it safe." "I know." We walked through each room, one last time. He carried the final box to the car. Not many things, just what mattered. At the door, Evan appeared. He looked uncertain, like a boy caught in the middle of something too adult. "You're leaving," he said. "I'm choosing. Even after everything, you won. It wasn't about winning." He rubbed his forehead. "So what was it about? Not waiting to be pushed again." He looked at Caleb. "She can't just give up the house." "She's not," Caleb said. "She's keeping it. And she's giving herself a life." I turned to Evan. You can stay here for now, but you'll speak to Caleb about everything going forward, not me. Mom, I'm not angry anymore, I said, but I've stopped hoping you'll see me for who I am. He stepped back. I stepped forward. Caleb opened the passenger door. I got in. We drove in silence for a long time. Then, gently, he said, "You're the strongest person I know." I shook my head. Not strong, just finished waiting. He smiled. When we arrived at the farmhouse, Louise greeted me at the gate. She didn't hug me. She just reached for my bag and said, "We've made space for you." And for the first time in a long time, I stepped into a place not built by my hands, but ready to receive me as I am. Not as a guest, not as a burden, as a person with a name and a voice. My new room was small. A bed, a chair, a narrow window that looked out onto an orchard just starting to turn with fall. No staircase, no framed degrees, no reminders of what had been claimed or contested. The first night, I slept without interruption. No footsteps outside my door, no kitchen arguments, no boxed-up books. Just the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional creak of old wood that groaned without menace. In the morning, I joined the others in the sunroom. We drank tea. Someone had made blueberry scones. A woman named Judith passed me a jar of homemade jam and said, "I hear you like crossword puzzles." I nodded. She slid me the paper. "You'll fit in fine," she said, and smiled. Later, I walked through the garden. Tomatoes still clung to the vines. Someone had planted kale. I found a pair of gloves on a hook and began pulling weeds without being asked. That's the thing about being older. No one expects you to start over, but no one realizes how quietly powerful it feels when you do. That afternoon, I called Caleb. "How's it feel?" he asked. "Like a beginning," I said. He paused. "I came by the house this morning." "Oh?" They weren't home, but it felt different. Like it had exhaled? I smiled. "Houses know things." "We got the tax notice," he said. "Still in your name." "I want to talk about that." He waited. "I'm not selling it." "Okay. But I don't want them living there indefinitely either." "Understood." "I want to donate it," I said. Caleb said nothing for a moment. "To who?" "To the Women's Veteran Housing Fund," I said. "After I pass. But starting now, I want to draft a use agreement. When Liza and Evan move out, and they will, it should be turned into transitional housing, not a shelter, a place with dignity, for women who've been told over and over that they don't belong anywhere." Caleb exhaled slowly. "I can draft that with Heldman. There's a spare bedroom, a yard. It can hold someone's beginning if we let it. I'll make sure it happens." "Thank you." He hesitated. Then, "Are you okay with letting it go?" I looked out the window. A robin was on the fence post, tilting its head like it was listening. "I'm not letting it go," I said. "I'm making sure it means something beyond me." Later that evening, Louise brought over a folder with the names of new applicants for the co-housing group. She was expanding. Another house across town, a small grant from the state. She asked if I wanted to help interview candidates. "I was a teacher once," I said. "I know how to listen." She smiled. "That's what we need." That night, I lay in bed and thought of Harold, of Evelyn, of the version of myself that once apologized for breathing too loudly in her own kitchen. And I said quietly, into the dark, "We're not done. We've just started again." It's been 6 months. The garden here is unrecognizable now, full of raised beds, benches. Caleb helped us build, and rows of herbs I never knew how much I'd missed until I smelled rosemary in the wind. The house in the city stands quiet most days. Evan and Liza moved out 3 weeks after the court dismissed their case. No drama, just silence and short texts about forwarding mail. They now rent a townhouse closer to his office. Liza hasn't spoken to me since. Evan sent a photo of Caleb on his birthday. Just Caleb. No caption. I replied, "He's growing into his name." There was no answer, and I didn't expect one. Some things aren't broken, just finished. The transition papers for the house are in order now. The Women's Veteran Housing Fund Board approved the future designation. The name Harold and Marilyn Jarvis Transitional Home will one day be engraved on a brass plaque beside the front steps. It will outlive me. That's the point. Last week, a woman named Trina moved into the new co-housing house across town. 53, divorced, survived a controlling marriage, breast cancer, and the death of her sister. She sat with me on the porch 2 nights ago and said, "It's the first time I've had my own key in years." I didn't tell her everything, just smiled and said, "You'll never need to earn the right to exist here." And I meant it. Caleb comes by every Sunday. Sometimes he brings muffins. Sometimes just his tired face and gratitude he doesn't know how to say. We don't need much talk. He helps me with the books for the community fund and listens when I ask, "How's the work treating your conscience?" He laughs and says, "We're both still fighting the quiet fight, Grandma." I told him last week I want to start writing things down. Not in the notebook I used during the trust dispute. That one's finished. Locked in the cedar box. A record, not a story. I mean a new notebook. A clean one. He asked, "What will you call it?" I said, "Things no one asked, but someone needed to hear." I suppose this is the first entry. Because here's what I've learned. Late, but not too late. You can give and still keep your dignity. You can forgive and still close the door. You can be alone and still be whole. And sometimes, the most radical thing a woman can do at any age is stop explaining herself. So if you're reading this and you've ever been made to feel like your time is over, or your voice is too quiet, or your presence is something to apologize for, let me say plainly, you are not done. You are not fragile. And you don't need permission to claim your space. Not in your home, not in your life, not in this world. If this story touched something in you, if you saw yourself between these lines, then stay. Speak. Share. Or just breathe a little deeper, knowing someone else stayed too. And if you can, pass it on. Because some of us bloom late. But when we do, we hold the sun.